get my 6. Yeah. Real coffee. What do you mean that's crazy? Drink coffee, then go out here and find Bigfoot Sasquatch. Takes a crazy person to do that? Who you think you're dealing with, brah? As you can tell, I got a ways to go here. So while I'm sitting here drinking this here coffee, I figure maybe I ought to tell you a story because it's been a while. As you know, if you follow the channel, my beautiful bride Dearly, aka Giggly Girl, and my son Daniel are over in the Philippines right now, visiting family. And she's been gone. How long has she been gone now? Let's see. Well, I know she's been gone long enough for me to get blisters all over my hands. Think I'm a kidding. Look at that. See it? What? Oh, come on, brah. Seriously? No. Gross. Been getting blisters all over my hands because I've been playing my guitar till it hurts too bad to play anymore. I can go for a couple hours now at a time. You know, it's just been a while. I'll just be sitting there listening to music and I'll hear a song I like and I bet you I can just figure that one out. Like, I know we got a lot of viewers from the UK over there watching. Here's one of my favorites from a young gentleman from over on your side of the pond. Stop the clocks, it's amazing. I don't know the rest of the words, and I'd get in trouble for copyright infringement anyway. But listen, here's what I'm working on. I'm working on potentially having a concert up here in June, like on the internet. Got a social distance, just like the world's greatest social distancer, okay? So I'm just, you know, getting in the habit of playing a few songs I used to know how to play and learning some new ones like that. That song's only a few months old, I think. So, of course, I only heard it a few months ago. But you're sitting around playing this guitar, having a conversation with my beautiful bride Dearly, FaceTiming while she's over there in the Philippines, that I was reminded of this story. And before I go a minute further into the story, I want to give a special shout out and a special thank you to Brian Wedmore. He's been viewing us here for a few months. He's the one, I'm sure you're recognizing the gifts that I got recently, and I gave proper thanks to the senders, and I'm thanking you again if you're watching. I mistakenly thanked the guy who took care of shipping that 1959 cherry red convertible Mercedes-Benz to me as being the one that actually purchased it for me. But Brian Wedmore is the one that went out there and looked for this old antique relic and found it. And I thank the shipper. So Brian, thank you for that convertible Mercedes-Benz. You missed that, brah? Man, I'll put that video on the end of this one. You got it. It's a beauty. All right, so anyway, sitting around playing guitar, talking to Dearly, and she's telling me a funny story about how Daniel, and listen, this is a cultural thing. You've got to understand this how it works, okay? Here in the West, especially in the U.S., we sleep in beds, most of us. We sleep in wonderful beds. Not so much in Eastern culture. In Asia, you know where folks sleep, most of them? On the floor. Just on the floor. Some folks will use a mat, a very thin mat made out of bamboo or palm leaves. So it's not like that's that comfortable. They might sleep on a blanket. This blew my mind because I lived over there for 6 years. I was like, I gotta have a bed. I have a bad back. I have chronically inflamed lower lumbar due to time and service there in Iraq. It's like, I gotta have a bed. So for the longest time, the most I had was like a 2-inch thick cushion, and it sucked. But it's amazing how the body adapts. But I eventually did reach the point where I could afford to buy a proper bed for us. And it's still over there. When we left the country, we gave all of our furniture and stuff to Dearly's parents and her family. So while Dearly is in the Philippines, she's sleeping in our old king-size bed at that, with like half a dozen of her brothers and sisters and nieces and nephews. Well, she's trying to get Daniel to sleep there too because it's the only bed in the house. But he keeps going downstairs. He's sneaking downstairs, sleeping on the floor with his little cousins and aunts and uncles and stuff. And he's telling Dearly, he says, I want to be a real Filipino. I want to sleep on the floor. And so she was laughing about that. And she told that story in a video. And I guess a couple of people over here who have no idea how the other 80% of the rest of the world lives took offense to that. People who are not Filipino and who I'm sure will never go to the Philippines called my wife some nasty names. Listen, brah, that's what it's like over there. You want to find out, you know what, guys? I learned more about the real world and real life in my 6 years in the Philippines than I did the entire 35 years of my life before that. And I've been to college, brah. I read the textbooks. I got the little piece of paper that says I know some stuff. And I was in the Army. I was an airborne infantryman, and I fought in Iraq. The 6 years in the Philippines, let me tell you, I learned. I hope I don't take so much of the things for granted that I used to. I hope I take nothing for granted. Anyway, I'm watching Dearly's videos. You can see how they're doing over there. Go subscribe to her channel. It's called Life with Dearly. She made a video the other day of her little niece and a cousin doing laundry by hand. And we did that over there for years. And I had major culture shock, as you can imagine, when I went over there and I decided to live there and stay because, surprise, surprise, Miss Dearly and I had a bouncing baby boy and I wasn't going to leave him. You know, and you might say, well, couldn't you have kind of been used to that though because you had been in Iraq, so you're kind of that used to that third world thing? No. You want to know where the best year as far as eating goes in my life was the year I was in Iraq. Okay, now I was one of the 7% of soldiers who actually deploy to combat zones who actually leave the green zone. It's a number you probably didn't know. Something like, I think it's 7%. The other 93% never leave the green zone. And the same 40% of soldiers deploy over and over and over again, while the other 60% stay stateside. I'm not judging. There's all these different MOSs. I'm saying I'm part of that minority was there, left the FOB. But when we were on the FOB, that's Forward Operating Base, or the Green Zone, man, you go in that chow hall just about any night you wanted it. Shrimp, lobster. So let me tell you, that experience and my experience in the Philippines, day and night. So anyway, we were talking about the sleeping arrangements thing. Daniel's sleeping on the floor. I'm playing the guitar. And I thought of this guy who, for a time when I was in the Philippines, when I lived in a certain province, I guess he was my best friend. His name was Badour. Badour. Let me tell you about Badour and an interesting night that happened while I was up on Badour's mountain with him and some of his best good buddies. So this was in Mindanao, right? Where the U.S. State Department says, do not go. So where, of course, is a bat crap crazy combat veteran who wasn't doing well in the post-war afterlife. Man, that sounded like the place to be to me. So guess where I went? Spent 6 years. All right, well, you got a pretty major city down there, and then once you get outside of that city, you just go for hours and hours and hours of what they call the provinces, what here in the West we would probably more commonly refer to as the jungles. So I'm way out there in the jungles, got this beautiful, young Filipina lady, dearly, and then this healthy, happy, bouncing boy. Man, what am I going to do about this? Ooh. I tell you, if you want to, people say you would like to hear more stories about my time over there. I wrote a book called Isle of Capri. Read that if you haven't. You can get it on Amazon. The link is in the description box below. You can get it in print or Kindle on Amazon. It's kind of written as fiction, but that's enough. That's enough said right there. Read that, because there's stories in there, things that happened that I could never tell on social media. So anyway, Badour. Badour spoke 4 words of English. One of them was my name, Kevin. The other 3 were, I love you. Badour just always told me, I love you, Kevin. That was how we would communicate. Now, he would speak to me in his language, which was not Tagalog, the national language of the Philippines, but down in Mindanao, most people speak Visayan. Badour didn't even understand Tagalog. He spoke very little Visayan. It wasn't even Ilocano. That's an indigenous language to northern Luzon. It was something like that there. There's more than 100 languages in this country. Badour, he wasn't stupid by any means. He was not stupid. He wasn't dumb. He was from so far out in the middle of the jungle, in the middle of Mindanao, you would think it was the end of the world. Actually, when I first went to Badour's house in Badour's mountain, I said to Dearly, I have discovered the end of the world. Beautiful, dark, jungle, swampy area, but from the right position, you could look over the mountain and see the ocean. You could see the beaches and you could see the waves crashing on it. Then you turned around and it was dark jungle with clean swamp water. It was an amazingly beautiful place. So I would hang out with Badour. Kesaboko Visayan, that means I understand Visayan, and not as much as I did when I've been over here for almost 6 years now, and I don't use it nearly as much. Over there, I learned to in about a year, after about a year of living in that place, out in that province, I spoke it fluently enough to be able to have conversations with people, because I quickly learned they weren't going to take the time to learn English. And but Badour and I always had a bit of an issue communicating, because he barely even spoke Visayan. So there was there's a drink over there, if you can call it that. I would say a more accurate description for it would be the worst, most disgusting table vinegar you've ever tasted in your life, but it has alcohol content in it. It's called tuba, like tuba, the big musical instrument, Tuba, but it's pronounced tuba. Basically, to make tuba, they would tap a coconut tree and get the liquid out of the coconut tree, not coconut juice from the coconut, but the liquid that came from the tree. And I'm hesitant to call it sap, because it's not sticky like a pine. Just the liquid from a coconut tree. And they would just let it ferment in like these big 30-gallon trash cans with lids on them for like 30 days. Rot, spoil, smelled and tasted worse than the absolute worst table vinegar you could imagine. That's the only way I can describe it. But man, it'll knock you on your butt. So back in those days, I consumed such beverages. Never tuba, okay? I consumed alcoholic beverages back in those days. Badour, Dearly and I would be out walking through the jungle, and we'd pass his house, and he'd say, "Kevin, I love you, tuba, tuba," because he was always drinking the stuff, him and his buddies, and they drank it out of like half coconut shells. And I would say, "No, Badour, I'm not drinking any tuba. I love you too, buddy, but no, Well, I was there. It's funny, I used to hire Badour to cut wood for me. Here's a stat that'll blow your mind, brah. This one's for you, brah. Do you know what happens to 80% of the trees worldwide in the whole world that are cut down? Do you know who cuts them down and why? I knew you were going to say that, brah. Those evil, greedy American timber corporations. Wrong. 80% of every tree, all trees in the world that are cut down by people who use the wood for cooking. Now, of course, this is underdeveloped nations or developing nations, however I'm supposed to say it. It was called third world countries when I was growing up. And I mean no disrespect by any of this. I just don't know what I'm supposed to say exactly. It's so difficult. I've told people this, and this is true. You know that book, The Giver? It's like a juvenile, young adult fiction, and they turned it into a movie here a few years back. Read the book. The movie's okay, but the book, Caldecott Award winner, I think Newbery Award winner. These are awards that are given to the best written books those years in fiction for juvenile fiction. But the main character, he's a young man who's being told the reality of this utopia that everybody lives in, where they think, oh, everything's the same for everybody and blah, blah, blah. But only one person knows the truth, and that's the old man called the Giver. And the reason he's telling the information to his chosen prodigy, who will become the new giver, is because the old man has reached the point in which he must enter that beautiful light at the tunnel where he goes on to live happily ever after in an even better place. Well, the real story is that this utopian society is determined that once you pass a certain age, it's too expensive to keep you alive. So because of healthcare treatments and all this, the costs associated with that, you become a burden on the overall general society. So they have a ceremony for you, and they walk you down into this light, into this tunnel, and everybody believes you're going to a better place. But in reality, once you get past the curtains, they pull you over to the side and they dispatch you. That's I have to use that word on it. It's crazy. So anyway, having spent almost 10 years living in other non-advanced nations and seeing so much with these and hearing so much with this and feeling so much with just and then I come back, it's like reverse culture shock. I have to really be careful about what I say. It never occurred to me how sensitive so many people were in regard to simply hearing things that they didn't believe were possible. Guys, it's really hard to... There's a reason I don't tell a lot of stories about things that I experienced and things that happened over in other countries. Now, I could tell them there. And, my wife, she and I both, we have a big group of friends. A lot of our friends are Filipinas or Filipinos. And we sit around and we tell these stories to each other. And we laugh about how when you tell these stories over here, how people who have no clue what it's like over there, because they've never been, they'll never go. But how could you say that? That's offensive. Why? 80% of the world's population, who, by the way, lives on less than $2 US a day, or 80% of the trees around the world that are cut down and used for cooking, because that's how folks cook over there. Dearly and I did it for years. We come back to the U.S. and we got a grill, a Weber grill, and I remember the first time we bought charcoal, a bag of charcoal. We're cooking out. Some yuppie down the way came by and he goes, "Oh my God, you guys are using charcoal? People still use that?" I'm like, "What do you use?" And he was telling me about his $500 grill. I'm like, $500? Man, you could feed a village in the Philippines off of that for a month. You're dropping $500 on a grill, brah? Man, we thought we were wasting money to spend $10 on a bag of charcoal, and it took us another 2 years before we did it again because we burned through it. We wanted to grill out again, didn't have any charcoal. I said, "Honey, we cooked on wood in the Philippines for years. Why don't we grill with wood here?" And we do. And man, we have tons of wood. This is just a small portion. You're not even seeing it, brah. You're not even seeing all my wood, brah. I got a lot of wood. I got big, hard, strong wood. Got blisters on my hand from my wood and guitar. All right, back to the story. So anyway, after I'd been out in that jungle for a couple months, well, I wasn't too good didn't consider myself to be above drinking tuba, because that was my only option. So me and Badour were hanging out at my place, drinking tuba, telling each other how much we loved each other. Well, his wife comes to get him, and she was a neat lady. She spoke a little bit of English, actually. So she comes to get him, to drag him home, because he was the caretaker of the big hacienda. Okay, is what the term they use there. Spain occupied the Philippines for 433 years, and it was a feudalistic society that really is still feudalistic. Instead of having Spanish lords now, though, who own the lands and the resources and let the Filipino peasants live on there in exchange for free in exchange for the labor they do. Basically, they grow the coconuts, they harvest the bananas, the sugar cane. Basically, the Americans ran the Spanish out in the American Civil War from 1898. Well, and then we stayed and occupied till 1903, and then we left. The Filipinos ran us out. But the way of doing things stayed very similar, except the wealthy elite Filipinos became the landowners, and a lot of them, this is how it is, through corrupt politics. Many of the politicians, the congressmen, the senators, this is just how it is, are also the large landowners who let everybody, the have-nots, live on their land for free in exchange for the labor they do to harvest the coconuts and the sugarcane and the bananas. So this was Badour's job, and he had to get up. They were harvesting coconuts the next day. Badour, to describe Badour, he's about 10 years older than me. So back then, he would have been about the age I am now, late 40s. He's about my height, very dark skinned, because he was always out working in the sun with nothing but a pair of shorts on, and skin and bones, but not sickly looking, not like anorexic looking. Just, you could tell this guy worked physically from sun up till sundown, and he probably ate just enough food to survive, which is common for people like Badour over there. He had no fat, certainly no fat, and he was muscular, but not like, he didn't even look like a guy that worked out. Not quite skin and bones, but not much more than skin and bones. But healthy. And you should see the way these guys get those coconuts. They chop these little slats into the coconut trees about 4 feet apart. One on this side of the tree, then like this, up like this. Only big enough for you to get, I can't even raise my foot this high, this part, the edge of your big toe. I'm wearing flip-flops today because it's a beautiful day, as you can see, into that little notch. They don't want to cut bigger into the tree because, of course, it can kill the tree. So they climb these trees using just that part of your foot. Let's say this is my foot, and I tried it. I couldn't do it. I couldn't get up, and I'm fit. I run, I work out. They'd laugh at me when I try to climb the coconut trees. And I think Badour got 2 pesos for every coconut he harvested. So he'd had his machete here on his side, and he'd climb up that tree. And if he got like maybe 6 or 8 coconuts out of there, he'd get 12 or 15 pesos per tree. How much is that in US dollars? Well, it takes 50 pesos roughly to make $1. So he was getting about 40 cents per tree. And he made good money, but only during the harvest, because he would work all day and he would make 1,200 pesos a day. Well, after about a week, all the coconuts were harvested, and he didn't get paid. He didn't have that work to do again for about 6 months. So, of course, his wife would take the money and try to budget it out as much as she could. They didn't have rent, didn't have utilities, no electricity. They burned, and this was common where we lived, the entire village. We burned kerosene lamps, and only sparingly, because when you're out of kerosene or candles, when you're out of kerosene or candles, it might be a while before you had any more money to replace it to burn some more. So only the super rich people of the communities had electricity, and they were few and far between. Most of them were politicians. So Badour's wife came and got him. He had to go harvest coconuts the next day. He couldn't hang out with me too late. Well, we had a good buzz going from drinking that rot gut, worse than freaking cheap table vinegar tuba coconut wine. So I wanted to go with Badour, and Dearly's like, you go, just don't be late. I'm like, okay. So we go up the mountain, and there's a couple other guys that worked with Badour living up there. They see that Badour comes back, so they come over. They bring tuba. We're drinking, and Badour's wife's coming out. She's like, you guys got to go to bed. You got to work tomorrow. And I was like, all right, I'm going to go home. And they're like, no, you can't go home. You can't go home this late at night, not by yourself, especially you've been drinking all this tuba. At least that's what I thought they were saying. And I said, well, okay, I'll stay here, but I got to have a bed. There's got to be a bed. And there was one guy there that spoke very broken English, and this is what I think he was saying. He said there was only one bed. It was up the hill. I thought this was a rock formation. Up on top of the hill, it was like a semicircle, but it did appear to have a roof. I noticed it when I've been up there before. Now, this night we got up there after dark, but I had seen this before when I've been up at Doors. I thought it was just like a rock pile, and maybe some kids put some sticks over it to make like a lean-to. But what it was, to the best of my understanding, is that was the fallen remains of an old, not a Spanish mission, but the church of an exiled Spanish priest. He had been exiled by the church, and this is back at some point, for 433 years while Spain was there, ruling the Philippines. This priest, so the story goes, which I got this story much, much later after this strange night, and you're going to agree, very strange things happen. The story goes is that this priest was excommunicated from the church because all he ever did was drink heavily, play music obsessively on his old Spanish guitar, and he liked girls. And I guess he wasn't supposed to. That was a B. Whew. He was supposed to have taken a vow to not do such things. Well, he broke that vow over and over and over. So they told him, you're done. You're out of here. Go, leave, get out of town. So he made his way to this small village, and he set up shop here, had this house, had some of the locals help build him this stone house. And he didn't minister. He didn't, preach. He just drank very heavily, played music on his Spanish guitar, and entertained the ladies. Well, he died there, and the story goes that at times you could hear music coming from a guitar, Spanish type music from an old Spanish guitar. People were scared of the place, and they used it as storage. And they told me in very, very broken English, the only bed even close to here is up there in that ruin, that old haunted Spanish ruin. But you better not go sleep up there because the place is haunted. Like, oh, you guys are crazy. That's where I'm going. Because I'd advanced to drinking tuba, but I still had not advanced to being used to sleeping on the floor. It still hurt my back. So these guys, one by one, were just dropping like flies, passing out. And I was like, man, I'm the last man standing. I'm going to go up there, and I'm going to sleep in that bed. Badour's wife, mind you, had already dragged him into their little hut sometime before this. So I make my way up to where this thing is. I didn't have a light, but it was a cloudless night. The moon was full. I'd been hanging out in the dark, though I was seeing three of everything because of the tuba. My eyes had adjusted to the dark. I could see. So I go up there, and there's like a whole half wall missing off this place. So I didn't even use the door. I went to where that half wall was missing. I look in, and I can see the bed on the other side of this room, and it wasn't a big place. Maybe it was 25 to 30 feet across. There's a bed. And I see like old furniture stacked up, chairs, a bunch of rice sacks, a bunch of coconut husks. So I'm like, whatever. So I go over there staggering. I lay down in that bed, just like pretty much almost pass out. And I heard guitar music just like that come from nowhere. Well, I sat up and I looked back to where that half wall was missing, the way I'd come in, and by the light of the moon, I could see what I swear looked like a skeleton sitting in one of those chairs with an old Spanish guitar, strumming a tune. Well, I knew what was going on. It was Badour, had to be. Built like a skeleton like that. And of course, it was, though I could, see enough by the light of the moon to make things out, I couldn't see specifics or details. Strum again. I said, all right, Badour, you're going to try to come up here with your guitar, which I never knew he played, try to scare me like that? You want to play music, you play your music, I'll get up and dance to it. So the music starts. He just starts strumming. I get up, I start dancing. I'm like, haha, you guys think you got me? Think you got me good? Well, I turn around and I'll be doggone if some of the chairs that were in that old storage unit, which is what looked like a storage unit, that old broken down Spanish ruin, the chairs were dancing. The furniture was dancing. I was like, oh my God, this tuba is That was the first and the last time I ever drank tuba. I never drank tuba after that again. So I'm trying to get closer to the furniture, which I swear looks like it's dancing, it's moving around. Songs are just being blared out on the guitar. I grab one of the chairs. I figure, hell, if it's dancing, I'm going to dance with it. Next thing I know, I trip. I fall in bed. The next thing I know, I hear roosters crowing. The sun is shining right through where that wall used to be. And by 8 a.m. over there, it's already 90 plus degrees. It was obviously after 8 a.m. because I was so hot. I was burning up. I was covered in sweat. It's like, oh my God, this is horrible. So I get up, I walk out, I go down to Badour's hut. He's long gone. Him and those other guys, they've been working for 3 hours. Because when the sun's up at 5, man, those guys were up in those trees harvesting those coconuts. Well, his wife's there, and she's handing me coffee made by coffee beans that they grew there. It's really amazing. What an experience. I mean, I drank coffee like that for years. The beans were grown there on the spot and hammered up. So I'm having my coffee, and I tell Badour's wife, tell Badour when he comes in for lunch that was a real nice trick he played on me last night. And she's like, huh? I said, Badour, his trick, guitar, Badour's guitar. She's like, Badour no guitar. She said Badour didn't have a guitar, didn't play guitar. Well, I didn't believe her. I finished my coffee. I went home. Dearly, of course, was pissed that I didn't come back till the next day, but whatever. She got over it. And, when I saw Badour again, I told him, haha, nice trick with the guitar. And he didn't really understand what I was saying. But to my understanding, Badour doesn't have a guitar and Badour doesn't play guitar. Well, look at that. I'm finished. It's because you probably heard that. I dumped the rest out. Had enough for today. So you know what I'm going to do now? Get my 6.